Okay. Okay, and we are live. It is 17:22 on Monday, the 16th of September. And what I'm going to do is a quick run through essentially three things: coding on the EOS blockchain, coding in Electron, and coding on the Beaker DAT protocol protocol platform. And then I'm just having a quick scan through what it is that Grub Street wishes to be on top of any all of those platforms, and what those platforms are actually able to do is to provide an output rendered into any operating system, be it Android on a mobile, be it iOS on a mobile, be it a desktop Windows system, etc., so on and so forth. Now, this is improvised, and I'm going to do it as it comes intuitively based on what I've been doing today. Now, just to have some idea of what I've been today, if I get my history showing up on the screen here, if I just click up history, and if we go to the beginning of the day, I'm going to just start from there, if I may. Now let me just check I think I'm okay for volumes. If we just get to this morning, and I woke up this morning with a fresh brain after having slept on yesterday's endeavours. Here we are. What did we do first? Okay, an exchange of emails with a programmer friend in India. Then I had an exchange of emails with Devon at OIP Alexandria in California. Then I started looking at the recent blogs I've been doing on scalable reading, Xanadu, Xanadox, and opened a bunch of windows on those. Then Izu, which is a online publication platform, which has got a booklet in there. And then I got to the about building EOS, build EOS, EOS DAT development, and so forth. Okay, and so on that, what I am going to do is just drag this in here. Now here we have the Electron interface, and what you can do with this is you can open a terminal, new terminal. Where's it going to be? So if I open a terminal here, and if I just copy that, okay, and then I can open the blog, which opens in a new window here, the Electron blog. I can and then I can do various things from there. So if I open another another terminal, put that here, same deal again. Copy that, and I want to look at API demos here. So what you can, this is a little bit like React or running HTML and JavaScript files in folders on a local server, usually on 8080, and what is fascinating about this is that it enables peer-to-peer communication, which is also what ZeroNet does, which is another peer-to-peer communicating platform. And what I've been fascinated with is the idea of end-to-end encryption and peer-to-peer communication, which is what the internet used to be like. Now, distributed applications are associated in my mind with blockchain. That's why I got into Ethereum and smart contracts and things like that. The reason I got into that was that I felt that the peer-to-peer aspects of that kind of communication were a very good way of not having censorship and single points of failure and whatnot. I consider politically it to be a single point of failure to have any source of information subject to censorship. And of course political censorship is the end of freedom, the end of liberty, and that is not something that appeals to me. And so in terms of distributed applications and distributed autonomous organizations, the ability for those things to happen on the internet is not predicated upon the existence of blockchains. Blockchain is a different question altogether. So I've entitled this video, "It's all about the DAG," you know, all about the base, all about the DAG. Now, DAGs are distributed acyclic graphs, and I've been doing a lot of work on Neo4j, graph databases and whatnot the last few weeks, because what I've been very interested in is what I now see is called by Professor Muller of Northwest University as scalable reading. I'm interested in word tags, word clouds and metadata, and it's the metadata in the Open Internet Index Protocol and the Flow blockchain and the Florin currency, which allows chunked metadata to be placed on a blockchain. Now, the blockchain aspects of timestamping stuff, yeah, I get that. But what it does is there's loads and loads of stuff that it just isn't needed for. And therefore, one, when it comes to designing, which I am a new browser, which is a multimedia browser for multimedia media rich six senses communication, obviously absent smell. clearly there's no such thing as smell-o-vision, and there's no such thing as smell-o-internet. But touch and touch interfaces, sight, obviously, hearing, obviously, even dimensional aspects, like 3D perception, is something which I mean, it's been possible for ages. I mean, I can remember the Oculus headsets we had at the launch of one of my data center developments, which was back in 1999, 2000. So those aspects of technology, whilst they've improved with improved processing speeds, etc., and parallel computing and graphics, so on and so forth, the idea of providing a 3D multi-dimensional multimedia experience in the internet, in the kind of the morphic resonance of the distributed cloud, as it were. That's what this sort of app, Electron, is pointing towards. Now, the EOS stuff is all here, and there's a video of why I linked earlier, and then there's the development environment, etc. Now, what I actually want to do is we opened up the Electron windows. This is the Electron GitHub, and GitHub is a wonderful way of storing, accessing, searching code databases, but that could be anything. I did a post yesterday, or some posts yesterday, on the stuff to do with scalable reading and the searchable databases of where are we? Let's just go down through here. It's this one here. It's the Chicago Homer, and also the Word Horde, and Professor Martin Muller. So this blog here is very interesting, and you can see the basic essentials of what a graph database is, and then interestingly this morning
today
I've been watching.
I want to talk about making great apps,
this is a
both
great
mobile
talk,
apps and web apps.
by this guy, Lee Byron, who is a programmer, I think some high up programmer guy at Facebook, but we won't hold that against him. It really is a really very good talk. Facebook, although it's got this Libra thing coming up, is a server-based model. In my opinion, it's highly server-based, top-down, and Facebook, as with Google, in my world, are not our friends. The fact is, though, that this query language that these guys have come up with, and open sourced, is very good, very useful, and this talk is well worth watching, because this guy really does know what he was talking about, and you know, we really want this sort of guy to be on our side if you get my drift. I haven't just subscribed to that yet. So let's just get Beaker. Here's Beaker here. Okay, which will open, and this tells you how to make this. Now, obviously, I've got this on my system already. So what I need to do is just open another terminal here, and I'll pull that in here. And I need to CD that folder, copy. That one, yeah, no, it's not. Let's move it from the top here. Which one is it? Right, okay, paste that. Okay, so we're going to CD Beaker, and as we've built it already, all we need to do is start it. Hopefully, I've updated my graphics driver to do the live stream, so we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully that hasn't screwed it up. So if we do start. Okay, let's restore the session, and what I'm going to do is close this Chrome window, and this is going to open where I was in this browser in its state back then, and this is peer-to-peer internet with no blockchain, which is just coming up here. And Open Internet Protocol, Library of Alexandria, is also implemented and can be implemented in the same way. Where blockchains come in and incentives from cryptocurrencies is that it provides you a network which provides persistence and immutability that the Byron guy's going on about in you know, the Facebook chat. What's important to remember is that blockchains aren't needed for peer-to-peer communication and distributed communication. Now, the person that turned me on to this was Erlang, Joe, and also the Tiddlywiki guys, and it was Jeremy at Tiddlywiki that switched me on to the Beaker browser. Now this is the Beaker browser here now, okay, and I've only got 2 peers on here. Review network activity. Okay, so this is the Beaker browser, and this is what they're sharing with me on a peer-to-peer basis. And all of these things here are what you'll find in an application folder if you run applications from your browser. Now, for instance, if I go here to websites, okay, and if I click this index here, where's that go? That's going to open that then. Let's just go here. Here we are, look. So this is a copy of Wiki Ballot, which I've got on my hard drive. So with Wiki Ballot, for instance, that's hosted on a server with Mirrorlese at the moment, but I can place that folder into the Beaker browser environment and share that with anybody, and we can, you know, with editing rights, etc., we can both edit it, and we can store edited copies, and we can do all the stuff, including how wikis look after changes, so you can trace back through them. So are we back? I think this is now the online copy, I think. But for instance, you've got these things here, current and previous. That's a way of tracking changes that have been. And this is then when one gets into the idea of docuverses, and one gets into the idea of provenance of documents and sections of documents, and now where are we? Which is not that blog there. But anyway, if you look at Xanu docs and then look at the example that it gives, the Mojus example, which quotes from the King James Bible and then shows a passage and where it's quoted, and you can look at, you know, all those different books, references, and particular passages in 3 dimensions. And in my mind, what that reminded me of was Stellarium, and Stellarium is an open source astronomical program for star mapping and constellation mapping, and it's a multimedia rich environment. And of course, instead of stars, if you're looking at documents, and you can look around them, I was thinking about DJ Sadhu and his helical model of the universe video, and to my mind, that's what the possibilities of the internet as morphically resonating, that's a Rupert Sheldrake idea of morphic resonance, and it's something we can all place thoughts into and contextualize and draw from, you know, neural connections which fire off from that, which is what a search engine should do. It should fire off connections in the same way as James Burke's knowledge doc does, for instance. So the way the Beaker browser works, which is peer-to-peer and can be end-to-end encrypted, is very, very special. And Electron here is very special and very good. And EOS is very special and very good. And Open Internet Protocol and the Flow blockchain are all very good. But for publishing and the Xanadu idea, for the network, it's symbiosis and it's a mutuality idea, whereby the other instances which use blockchains, that's great. I'm not knocking blockchains, but as a publisher, you want to be able to publish everywhere and be indexed to everywhere, and that is the problem of censorship or anti-censorship. And anti-censorship is a completely different question to cryptography. You want to use timestamping for provenance, perhaps, and also for tracking changes in documents and to avoid vandalism. End-to-end encryption does that. You don't need a blockchain to do that. And as publishers on a network, the payment to the writer, the painter, the filmmaker, the documentary maker, the academic, the database curator, all of those things, the added value to giving the added human intelligence to the machine generated, algorithmically, algographic is what Professor Muller calls his searchable word databases, contextualizations, etc. The Lima examples which he gives are all scalable and applicable across all genres: music, writing, but also spoken word. And spoken word, it gets really exciting when you think about spoken word, because of course that takes us back to Homer and the Odyssey and the Iliad, and also to the Talmud and the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. In that, they came down by an oral tradition, and oral traditions and exegesis, which is the interpretation of an oral tradition, provides quite a lot to argue about in terms of meaning, and where meaning comes from. And I commented on a blog by Dr. Blau, the philosopher, the other day, in his Blau blog. He's recently published on that question. But I must admit, I found Professor Muller's writing, I spent a lot of time reading his blog yesterday. And these ideas, wrapped up with Ted Nelson's ideas in Xanadu, and the ideas also of Joe from Erlang, and the problem of censorship and anti-censorship is not a problem of cryptography, because you want people to be able to read what they want to read. So the question of paying the people who are writing and people being able to make a living from it is a different question. And Amy makes an excellent presentation at the OIP Alexandria thing, whereby the problem of transaction sizes, which web payments on networks come up against, is an interesting question on that point. Micropayments and distributed ledger technology do work well together. That is true, but that again is a different question to the actual publishing and publication, and I can't stress that strongly enough. So that's where I'm up to, and I've got a couple of decisions to make as to and they're not that hard to make either, because the way that JavaScript works, CSS works, HTML works, and plaintext, etc., those are all equally applicable and usable, regardless of what protocol you stick it on top of them. They port to all and any of them. That's the beauty of where the standardization has almost got to now, and the open sourcedness, if I could put it that way. So when you look at this folder here, you can see what this here was looking at. This is on my home. You can see up here in the URL bar. That's actually looking at my hard drive and then rendering that there. And with access to my hard drive on a peer-to-peer basis, That makes peer-to-peer communication possible, and this has also been dealt with on a social network basis. What's the name of that social network again now? Oh God, it's all wrapped up with the Scuttlebutt. Is it Scuttlebutt? Let's just have a quick look. I think it's Scuttlebutt. Let's have a look. I'm pretty sure. But that's the way that works. And it's also the way that Tiddlywiki and all the rest of it works as well. It is definitely called Scuttlebutt. Let's have a look. Scuttlebutt. Search like this. Peer-to-peer. So peer-to-peer social network. There we are, that's the one there, look, there we are. So that's on the P2P Foundation, and the P2P Foundation is interesting. That's where Satoshi started talking about Bitcoin. And anyway, so have a look at that. And I'm gonna stop there, because that's enough for me just to sort of now get back on track with what I am doing. So if I can find which window this is streaming from, I'll turn it off.
Developing desktop applications can be full of challenges that make it difficult to approach.
This is the
If you're used to
Electron
building
video,
web
by the
apps,
way.
desktop apps have their own delightful gauntlet of hard parts for things like packaging, installation, and managing updates. But there's also the design of the application itself. You have to translate your creativity for different operating systems if you want to make use of native features like menus and notifications.
Right. The link to that will be in the description. When I get round to doing it. And there we are. So if anyone has watched this, which I doubt, please check the video resolution, the current resolution, which is not right, okay, let's just say end stream.